She saw her toxic ex stalking toward her through the crowded nightclub, his face twisted with familiar rage. Without thinking, she threw herself at the nearest stranger, a dark-eyed man in an expensive suit who radiated danger. "Please," she whispered against his neck. "Don't let him find me." What she didn't know, she just begged for protection from the city's most ruthless mafia boss. A man who never showed mercy to his enemies. And he decided she was worth keeping. The bass thrummed through Sarah's chest like a second heartbeat as she pressed closer to the crowded bar, trying to disappear into the sea of bodies. The neon lights of Club Midnight painted everything in electric blues and pinks, making the whole place feel like a fever dream she desperately wanted to wake up from. "Come on, Sarah. Just one more drink," Lila shouted over the music, her blonde hair catching the strobing lights as she waved 2 martinis in the air. "You promised we'd have fun tonight." Sarah forced a smile and accepted the glass, though her stomach churned with each sip. Fun, right? As if she could forget why she needed this distraction in the first place. 3 months. 3 months since she'd finally found the courage to leave Mark, and she still jumped at shadows, still checked over her shoulder everywhere she went. "You're doing that thing again," Lila said, leaning close enough that Sarah could smell her expensive perfume mixed with alcohol. "The paranoid looking around thing. Mark's not here, okay? He doesn't even know about this place." Sarah nodded, trying to believe it. The restraining order was supposed to make her feel safe. The new apartment across town was supposed to give her a fresh start. But paper couldn't stop the way her heart hammered whenever her phone buzzed with an unknown number, or how she'd catch glimpses of dark hair in crowds and freeze until she realized it wasn't him. The music shifted to something harder, more aggressive, and bodies pressed closer on the dance floor. Sarah watched couples grinding together, lost in their own worlds, and felt a pang of something she couldn't name. When was the last time she'd felt that free? That unafraid? "I need some air," she called to Lila, but her friend was already being pulled onto the dance floor by some guy with too much gel in his hair and a smile that screamed trouble. Sarah pushed through the crowd toward the back of the club, where she'd noticed a quieter VIP section earlier. Maybe she could catch her breath there, figure out why coming here felt like such a mistake. Her blood turned to ice. There, by the edge of the dance floor, stood Mark. His dark eyes were scanning the crowd with the methodical precision of a predator, and even in the chaotic lighting, she could see the familiar set of his jaw when he was angry. Really angry. Their eyes met across the room, and his face twisted into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't looked so much like a threat. He started pushing through the dancers, his movement sharp and determined, and Sarah's paralysis shattered. She spun around, panic clawing up her throat. The exit was too far, blocked by too many people. The bathroom would trap her. Where could she go? Where could she? The VIP section. A raised platform with plush seating areas sectioned off by velvet ropes, guarded by men in expensive suits who looked like they could bench press a car. And there, in the corner booth furthest from the main floor, sat a man who seemed to exist in his own bubble of stillness despite the chaos around him. He was tall, even sitting down. She could tell that much. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that belonged in old Italian paintings. Beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in 6 months, and he held a glass of what looked like expensive whiskey like it was a weapon. But it was the way he sat that caught her attention. Completely relaxed, utterly in control, like he owned not just the booth, but the entire club. Like nothing and no one could touch him. Sarah didn't think. She couldn't think. Mark's voice was getting closer, calling her name over the music with that edge that meant trouble, and her body moved on pure instinct. She ducked under the velvet rope, ignoring the surprised grunt from the guard, and threw herself into the stranger's lap. Her arms wrapped around his neck like he was a life preserver, and she was drowning, which wasn't far from the truth. "Please," she whispered against his ear, her voice breaking. "Please don't let him find me." For a heartbeat, the man went rigid beneath her. She felt the coiled strength in his body, the way his muscles tensed like he was deciding whether she was a threat or just crazy. Then his arm came around her waist, strong, protective, possessive, and he pulled her closer. "Easy, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice low and rough like aged whiskey. There was an accent there, something that spoke of old money and older secrets. "I've got you." Sarah risked a glance back toward the dance floor and saw Mark pushing against one of the guards, his face red with fury. The guard, massive, with hands like ham hocks, simply shook his head and crossed his arms. Mark tried to argue, gesturing wildly in Sarah's direction, but the guard's expression never changed. "Friend of yours?" the stranger asked, and Sarah could feel his attention shift to Mark like a predator focusing on prey. "Ex," Sarah managed, her heart still pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it. "He won't leave me alone. He's not supposed to be here. There's a restraining order." Something changed in the man's posture. Not more tense, exactly, but more focused. Like he'd just decided something important. His free hand moved to rest on her thigh, the touch casual but unmistakably claiming. "What's his name?" The question was asked so quietly Sarah almost missed it over the music. "Mark. Mark Davidson." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "You did exactly what you should have done." His thumb traced a small circle on her leg, and despite everything, Sarah felt herself beginning to relax for the first time in months. "I'm Dante." Just Dante. No last name, like he didn't need one. Like everyone should already know who he was. She watched Mark try one more time to get past the guards, saw him pull out his phone, probably to call the police and report her for violating the restraining order, something he'd threatened before. But as he lifted the device, another guard appeared beside him. This one didn't speak, just stared, and Mark's hand slowly lowered. "How did you?" Sarah started to ask. Dante's hand shifted to her back, steady and warm. "Let's just say people tend to listen when I suggest they leave." Mark shot one last venomous look in their direction before disappearing into the crowd. Sarah felt the tension leave her body so fast she almost collapsed. Only Dante's arms kept her upright. "Thank you," she breathed. "I don't know how to." "No need," he studied her face with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light. "You're safe. That's all that matters." Something in his tone made her shiver, though not from fear. There was a promise there and a warning. Safe with him, maybe, but safe from him? That was an entirely different question. "I should go find my friend," Sarah said, though she made no move to leave the warm circle of his arms. Dante's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Of course. But Sarah?" She froze. She hadn't told him her name. "If he bothers you again, call me." A business card appeared in his hand like magic, heavy cardstock with just a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no company. Day or night. Sarah took the card with trembling fingers. "How do you know my—" But when she looked up, Dante was watching the crowd again, his expression unreadable. Dismissed, apparently. She slid off his lap on unsteady legs and immediately missed his warmth. "Thank you," she said again, but he just nodded without looking at her. Sarah made her way back through the crowd in a daze, the business card burning against her palm. She found Lila by the bar, drunk and giggly, completely oblivious to what had just happened. "There you are. Where did you disappear to? I saw you talking to some gorgeous guy, but then— Oh my God, Sarah, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Mark was here," Sarah said numbly. All the color drained from Lila's face. "What? Are you serious? Did he hurt you? Do we need to call the police?" "No, it's handled." I think Sarah's eyes drifted back to the VIP section, but the booth was empty now. Dante was gone like he'd never been there at all. "We should go home." Lila didn't argue, probably seeing something in Sarah's expression that warned her not to push. They gathered their things and headed for the exit, but as they stepped outside into the cool night air, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. A black sedan with tinted windows sat across the street, engine running. As they walked toward Lila's car, the sedan's window rolled down just enough for her to catch a glimpse of familiar dark eyes. Dante raised his hand in a small salute, and then the window slid up and the car disappeared into traffic. Sarah clutched the business card tighter and wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. She'd thought Mark was dangerous, but the man who'd just saved her? He was something else entirely. Something that made her pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. She was still thinking about his hands on her skin when she fell asleep that night, the business card tucked safely under her pillow like a talisman against the dark. The smell of burnt coffee and grease hit Sarah's nose as she tied her apron around her waist, trying to shake off the lingering unease from last night's sleep. She dreamed of dark eyes and gentle hands, of being held like something precious instead of something broken. The business card sat heavy in her purse, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. "Girl, you look like death warmed over," called Rosa from behind the counter of Murphy's Diner. At 62, Rosa had seen every kind of heartbreak walk through those doors, and she had a sixth sense for trouble. "Late night." "Something like that," Sarah muttered, grabbing the coffee pot and starting her morning rounds. The familiar routine of taking orders and dodging wandering hands from truckers usually grounded her, but today everything felt different, like she was waiting for something to happen. Lila burst through the door at exactly 10:30, still in yesterday's clothes with mascara smudged under her eyes. She slid into Sarah's section with the dramatic flair of someone who'd been rehearsing this conversation all morning. "Okay, spill everything," Lila demanded, not even bothering to look at the menu. "And I mean everything. Who was that guy last night?" Because Sarah, honey, men like that don't just help random girls out of the goodness of their hearts. Sarah poured Lila's usual coffee, extra cream, and tried to look casual. "I told you Mark was there. The guy helped me avoid a scene. End of story." "Bullshit," Lila leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I asked around after you left. You know what I found out? That VIP section? It's reserved every Friday night for the same group. And the guy you were all over? Sarah, I think that was Dante Moretti." The coffee pot slipped in Sarah's hands, sending brown liquid splashing across the table. "Sorry, I'm sorry. Do you know who Dante Moretti is?" Lila grabbed Sarah's wrist, her manicured nails digging into skin. "My cousin Tony works security downtown. He says Moretti runs half the businesses in the city. The kind of businesses that don't advertise in the yellow pages, if you know what I mean." Sarah's blood chilled. She thought of the way Dante's guards had appeared out of nowhere, how Mark had backed down without a fight, how Dante had known her name without asking. "You're being dramatic," Sarah said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Am I? Those weren't just bouncers, Sarah. Those were bodyguards. Professional ones. And the way that man looked at you," Lila shivered, "like he was deciding whether you were worth keeping alive." Before Sarah could respond, the diner's bell chimed. She turned to greet the new customer and felt the world tilt sideways. Mark stood in the doorway, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. His gaze found her immediately, and that familiar mix of rage and obsession twisted his features into something ugly. "We need to talk," he said, his voice carrying across the diner despite the morning crowd. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. "You need to leave," Rosa called from behind the counter, already reaching for the phone. "Right now, before I call the cops." Mark laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Call them. I'm not breaking any laws by getting breakfast." His eyes never left Sarah's face. "Am I, baby?" The pet name hit like a slap. Sarah's hands shook as she set down the coffee pot, muscle memory screaming at her to apologize, to make herself small, to do whatever it took to avoid his anger. But then she remembered the weight of Dante's arm around her waist, the way he'd made her feel protected instead of prey. "Get out," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Mark's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "That's not very friendly. Especially after the show you put on last night." He took a step closer, and Sarah instinctively backed toward the counter. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think your new boyfriend's little games would scare me off?" "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." The mask slipped, revealing the familiar rage underneath.
I saw you, Sarah.
Throwing herself at some stranger like a common whore. My detective says the guy's bad news. Really bad news. You have no idea what kind of danger you've put yourself in. Detective? Sarah's stomach dropped. Mark had hired someone to follow her. Again. The only danger here is you, Lila snapped, standing up so fast her coffee cup shattered against the floor. She has a restraining order, you psycho. Mark's attention shifted to Lila with predatory focus. And you must be the friend who keeps filling her head with ideas about leaving me. About being independent, his voice dropped to something almost conversational. You should be more careful about the advice you give, Lila. Sometimes it gets people hurt. The threat was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that for a moment nobody moved. Then Rosa was there with a baseball bat she kept behind the register, and two of the regular customers, both construction workers built like brick walls, were standing up from their booth. Time to go, pal, one of them said. Mark looked around the diner, taking in the hostile faces, the ready stance of people prepared to throw him out bodily. His smile never wavered.
This isn't over, Sarah.
It'll never be over. And when your new friend gets bored and throws you away like the garbage you are, I'll be waiting. He straightened his jacket with exaggerated care. I'll always be waiting. He left as suddenly as he'd arrived, but his presence lingered like smoke. Sarah realized she was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Honey, you need to call the police, Rosa said gently, setting the bat aside. File a report. He just threatened you in front of a room full of witnesses. Sarah nodded numbly, but she knew it wouldn't matter. It never mattered. Mark was too smart, too careful. He'd lawyer up, claim it was all a misunderstanding, maybe even flip it around and accuse her of harassment. The system that was supposed to protect her had failed before. But maybe she had another option now. Her hand found the business card in her purse, fingers tracing the embossed numbers. Dante had said to call if Mark bothered her again. Day or night. Sarah? Lila's voice seemed to come from very far away. You're scaring me. What are you thinking? Sarah looked up, and for the first time in months, she felt something other than fear. It wasn't quite hope, it was darker than that, more dangerous. But it was better than feeling helpless. I'm thinking, she said quietly, that maybe it's time to fight fire with fire. The black SUV appeared outside Murphy's diner at exactly 6 p.m., just as Sarah was hanging up her apron. She'd been watching for it since Mark's morning visit, clutching Dante's business card like a lifeline, but somehow she still wasn't prepared for the reality of it. Through the tinted windows, she could make out two figures in the front seat, but it was the man stepping out of the back that made her breath catch. Dante looked different in daylight, more real, more dangerous. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a leather jacket that did nothing to hide the predatory grace in his movements. Sarah, his voice carried the same low authority she remembered, but something had changed. There was an edge there now, something harder. We need to talk. She glanced around nervously. The dinner crowd was starting to filter in, and Rosa was watching from behind the counter with undisguised suspicion. Not here, Sarah said. People will. Get in the car. It wasn't a request. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the evening air. This wasn't the gentle protector from the club. This was someone else entirely. But when she hesitated, his expression softened fractionally. Please. You called for help. Let me help. Sarah had called 3 hours ago, after Mark's visit, after the shaking had finally stopped. She dialed the number with trembling fingers and left a voicemail that probably sounded as desperate as she felt. Now she was wondering if that had been a mistake. The drive passed in tense silence. Sarah watched familiar streets give way to unfamiliar ones, then to a part of the city she'd never seen before. Old warehouses and industrial buildings lined the road, their windows dark and empty like dead eyes. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere we won't be interrupted. The SUV pulled into an abandoned parking lot beside what looked like an old textile factory. Dante got out and waited for her to follow, his hands in his pockets, perfectly relaxed. But Sarah noticed how his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging every shadow, every potential threat. "Your ex came to see you today," he said without preamble. "Tell me exactly what happened." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things." Dante stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark. "Especially when those things concern people under my protection." "I never asked for your protection." "No? Then what was that phone call about, Sarah? What did you need help with?" She wanted to be angry at his presumption, at the way he spoke like she was already his responsibility. But the truth was, she did need help. More than she'd ever needed anything. "He threatened my friend," she said quietly. "And he hired someone to follow me. A private detective. He knows things about last night, about you." Something flickered across Dante's face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "What kind of things?" "He said you were dangerous. That I had no idea what kind of trouble I was getting into." Sarah looked up at him, studying his face in the dim light. "Is he right?" For a long moment, Dante didn't answer. Then he pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Marco?" "Yeah, it's me. Run a background check on Mark Davidson. Works downtown, probably finance or law. I want to know everything, where he eats, where he sleeps, who he's been talking to." He paused, listening. "No, this is personal." "And Marco?" "Do it quietly." He hung up and turned back to Sarah. "Your ex is about to become very sorry he involved me in his little obsession." "That's not an answer to my question, isn't it?" Dante stepped closer, backing her against the SUV. His hands came up to rest on either side of her head, caging her in without touching. "You want to know if I'm dangerous, Sarah?" "The answer is yes. Very dangerous. To people who threaten what's mine." "I'm not yours," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "No? Then why are you here? Why did you call me instead of the police?" His thumb traced her jaw, so gentle it was almost a caress. "Why are you looking at me like you want me to fix this for you?" Because the police had failed her before. Because restraining orders were just pieces of paper. Because for the first time in months, she'd felt safe in his arms. "I don't want to trade one controlling man for another," she said, echoing the words from her outline. Dante's laugh was low and rough. "Controlling? Sweetheart, if I wanted to control you, you'd already be locked away somewhere safe where Mark Davidson could never find you. This." He gestured between them. "This is me giving you a choice." "What choice?" "You can go home. Pretend last night never happened. Hope Mark gets bored and moves on to some other poor girl." His eyes darkened. "Or you can trust me to handle this my way." "Your way being?" "The permanent kind." Sarah's breath caught. There was no mistaking his meaning, no room for misinterpretation. He was talking about killing Mark. Maybe not in so many words, but the intent was clear as crystal. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Dante's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. "Marco's fast. Says your ex has been asking questions about me around town. Specifically about my business interests. That makes him more than just your problem now." "What does that mean?" "It means Mark Davidson just became a liability." He tucked the phone away, his expression growing cold. "And I don't tolerate liabilities." The casual way he said it, like Mark was just another item on a to-do list, should have terrified her. Instead, Sarah felt something inside her chest unfurl, something that had been crouched in fear for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "You really would do that? For me?" "I'd do worse than that for you." The honesty in his voice was brutal. "But I need you to understand what you're signing up for here."
My world isn't pretty, Sarah.
"It's not safe. And once you're in it, there's no going back to being the girl who serves coffee and hopes for the best." Sarah thought about Mark's threats, about the detective following her, about all the nights she'd lain awake wondering if he'd finally snap and hurt her. Or worse, hurt someone she cared about. "I'm already in it," she realized. "I was in it the moment I hugged you." Dante's smile was sharp as a blade. Then welcome to the family, sweetheart. 3 days passed before Dante called again. 3 days of looking over her shoulder at work. 3 days of jumping every time the diner bell chimed. 3 days of Rosa asking if she was feeling all right with that worried mother-hen expression she wore when she thought one of her girls was in trouble. Sarah was wiping down tables during the evening lull when her phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer anyway. There's a car outside. Dante's voice was quiet, controlled. Black sedan. Get in. Dante, I'm working. Now, Sarah. The line went dead. Sarah looked out the window and saw the sedan idling by the curb, windows down just enough to see Dante in the passenger seat. Even from a distance, she could read the tension in his posture. Rosa, I need to. Go, the older woman said, already taking the cleaning rag from Sarah's hands. Whatever's happening, that man out there looks like he means business. The drive took them to an upscale Italian restaurant in the financial district, the kind of place Sarah had only seen in movies. Dante let her pass the hostess stand without stopping, through a dining room full of suited men speaking in low voices, to a private room in the back. Sit, he said, pulling out a chair at a small table set for two. We need to talk. The service was immediate and silent. Wine appeared without being ordered, followed by plates of food that smelled incredible and tasted like nothing because Sarah's stomach was twisted in knots. You're scared, Dante observed, cutting into his veal with surgical precision. Shouldn't I be? You basically kidnapped me from work. I asked you to dinner. There's a difference. He set down his knife and leaned back, studying her face. Tell me about Mark. How did it start? Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Why? Because I need to understand what we're dealing with. The more I know about his patterns, his triggers, the better I can protect you. The wine was making her loose-tongued, or maybe it was the way Dante listened, completely focused, like every word mattered. Sarah found herself talking about things she'd never told anyone, not even Lila. He was perfect at first, she said, staring into her glass. Flowers, expensive dinners, all those little romantic gestures you see in movies. He made me feel special, like I was worth something. But then he started making suggestions. About my clothes, my friends, my job. Little things, you know? He'd say he just wanted me to be the best version of myself, Sarah laughed bitterly. I was so stupid. I thought it meant he cared. It wasn't stupid. It was manipulation. Dante's voice carried an edge of anger that wasn't directed at her. Predators like him, they're good at finding women who've never been treated well. They know exactly which buttons to push. How do you know so much about it? Because I've seen what men like him do to women they think they own. Something dark flickered across his face. My mother was married to a man like Mark. Different methods, same sickness. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, not pity, but recognition. They were both survivors in their own ways. When did you realize what he was? Dante asked. The first time he hit me, Sarah's fingers unconsciously traced her collarbone, where faint scars still marked where he'd grab her. He was so sorry afterward. Cried, bought me jewelry, promised it would never happen again. And I believed him. How many times? Too many. Sarah met his eyes, saw understanding there instead of judgment. The last time, he put me in the hospital. 3 cracked ribs and a concussion. That's when I finally found the courage to leave. But he wouldn't let you go. He said I belonged to him. That no one would ever love me the way he did. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes I believed him. Dante reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing over her knuckles. He was wrong. About all of it. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. There was heat in his dark eyes, something that made her pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Dante. Her phone rang, shattering the moment. Unknown number. Sarah's blood chilled. Answer it, Dante said quietly. Put it on speaker. Sarah's hand shook as she swiped to accept the call. Hello, sweetheart. Mark's voice filled the small room, sickeningly sweet. Enjoying your dinner? Sarah's free hand flew to cover her mouth, but Dante caught her wrist, shaking his head. Stay calm, his eyes said. How did you? Did you really think I wouldn't find out? My detective's very good at his job. Says you've been keeping some interesting company lately. Mark's tone shifted, became uglier. Did you fuck him, Sarah? Is that how you're paying for the fancy dinners? Mark, please. I'm watching you right now, actually. Sweet little place. Very romantic. Very public. The threat was unmistakable. Come outside, Sarah. We're going to have a talk. And tell your boyfriend to stay inside unless he wants this to get messy. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, her whole body shaking. Dante was already standing, his movements calm and purposeful. From inside his jacket, he pulled out a gun, sleek, black, deadly. Sarah had never seen a real gun before, not up close. It looked smaller than she'd expected and infinitely more terrifying. Stay here, he said. No, wait, Sarah grabbed his arm. He said not to. I know what he said. Dante's smile was razor-sharp. But Mark Davidson isn't the only one who can make threats. Through the restaurant's front window, Sarah watched Dante step onto the sidewalk. She couldn't see Mark, but she could see Dante's posture, predatory, controlled, like a big cat circling prey. Her phone rang again. Your boyfriend's got balls, I'll give him that. Mark's voice was tight with rage. But if he thinks he can intimidate me. The line went quiet. Then Mark was screaming, "Hi!" Panicked sounds that made Sarah's stomach lurch. When Dante returned 5 minutes later, his knuckles were bloody and his expression was grim. Pack a bag, he said quietly. You're staying with me tonight. Is he alive? For now, Dante's eyes were black as winter. But Sarah? Your apartment was broken into while we were talking. He's escalating. This isn't just obsession anymore. It's war. Sarah stood in the middle of her destroyed apartment, her hands shaking as she surveyed the damage. Her couch had been slashed open, stuffing scattered across the floor like snow. Picture frames were smashed, their glass grinding under her feet. Her bedroom was worse. Clothes torn and thrown everywhere, her mattress flipped and carved with a knife. He was looking for something, Dante said from behind her, his voice deadly calm. Or sending a message. Both, Sarah thought, picking up the remains of a photo of her and Lila from last Christmas. Mark had always hated that picture, said Lila was a bad influence, that she filled Sarah's head with ideas about independence. I can't stay here, Sarah whispered.
No.
You can't, Dante's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steadying. Pack what you need. You're coming home with me. Home. The word sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. When was the last time anywhere had felt like home? 20 minutes later, Sarah was following Dante's SUV through the wealthy district on the outskirts of the city. His house, mansion, really, sat behind high gates and manicured gardens, all limestone and tall windows that glowed gold against the evening sky. This is where you live? Sarah asked as they pulled into a circular driveway. One of the places. Dante helped her out of the car, his hand lingering at the small of her back. You'll be safe here. I promise. The interior was like something out of a magazine, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary. But it was the man waiting in the foyer that made her steps falter. He was shorter than Dante, stockier, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. When he looked at Sarah, she felt like a bug under a microscope. Marco Benedetti, he said, extending a hand that she shook reluctantly. Dante's told me about you. Marco's my consigliere, Dante explained, though the word meant nothing to Sarah. My advisor. He helps me make the hard decisions. Like whether strangers can be trusted? Sarah asked, meeting Marco's suspicious gaze directly. Marco's smile was sharp. Among other things. Dante, we need to talk. Privately. Later. Now, Marco's tone brooked no argument. It's about the Davidson situation. And our other problem. Other problem? Sarah watched the two men exchange a look loaded with meaning she couldn't decipher. Why don't you get settled? Dante said to Sarah, his tone carefully neutral. Maria will show you to your room. An older woman appeared as if summoned, her kind face creased with smile lines. But Sarah barely heard her cheerful chatter about fresh towels and dinner as she was led upstairs. Through the study's open door, she caught fragments of heated conversation. Too convenient, Marco's voice, sharp with suspicion. Not your decision to make, Dante. Equally sharp. What if the Rossellis sent her? Rossellis? Sarah paused on the landing, straining to hear more, but Maria was tugging her toward a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment. Later that night, unable to sleep in the unfamiliar bed, Sarah crept downstairs for water. The kitchen was dark except for the soft glow from under-cabinet lighting, and she was filling a glass when voices from the study carried through the silence. She's a liability, Marco was saying. This Mark Davidson, he's asking questions about our operations, about the docks, about the Torino deal. You think it's coincidence he starts sniffing around right after she shows up? She's not involved in this. How do you know? She throws herself at you in the club, plays the victim, gets you invested in protecting her. Classic honeypot operation. Sarah's blood chilled. They thought she was some kind of spy. You're being paranoid. Am I? What do we really know about her, Dante? She works at some diner, claims her ex is stalking her. But what if Mark Davidson isn't her ex? What if he's her handler? A long pause. Then Dante's voice quieter. I've considered that. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. He suspected her too. The man who'd promised to protect her, who'd made her feel safe for the first time in months, thought she might be playing him. The smart play is to eliminate them both, Marco continued. Clean, simple, sends a message to the Rossellis that we're not playing games. No, the word cracked like a whip. Sarah is off limits. But Davidson, another pause. Set up a meeting. Let him think he's getting what he wants. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. My emotions are what keep us human, Marco. Don't forget that. Footsteps approached the kitchen door. Sarah barely made it back upstairs before she heard Dante's voice calling her name, checking if she was all right. She called back that she was fine, just getting water, and heard his footsteps retreat. But she wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. The next morning brought another unwelcome surprise. Sarah was picking at breakfast when her phone rang, Lila's contact photo smiling up at her. Oh, thank God. Lila's voice was breathless with relief. I was so worried when you didn't come home last night. Are you okay? Where are you? Sarah glanced around the opulent dining room, where Dante was reading financial reports over his coffee like a normal person instead of someone who'd casually discussed murder the night before.
I'm
safe. Mark broke into my apartment. Jesus Christ, Sarah. Did you call the police? It's handled, the phrase tasted bitter. Everything was always handled in Dante's world. Handled how? Sarah, you're scaring me. Where exactly are you? I can't really talk right now. Are you with him? With Moretti? Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. Sarah, listen to me. I've been asking around, doing some research. This man is dangerous. Like, really dangerous. There are rumors about people who cross him just disappearing. Sarah's eyes found Dante across the table. He was watching her with that unreadable expression, probably hearing every word. I have to go, she said quickly. Sarah, wait. But she'd already hung up. When she looked up, Dante was still watching her. Friend worried about you? He asked mildly.
something like that.
It's natural. You disappeared without warning, moved in with a man she doesn't trust. He folded his paper with precise movements. Lila's smart to be concerned. Are you having me watched? I'm having you protected. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I've traded one prison for another. Dante's expression hardened. If that's how you feel, you're free to leave any time. But if you do, I can't guarantee what happens next. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her, just like they had with Mark. Different cage, different keeper, but a cage nonetheless. I need some air, she said, standing abruptly. I'll come with you, No, the word came out sharper than she intended. I need to be alone for a few minutes. Please. Dante nodded slowly, but she could feel his eyes following her as she walked outside. The gardens were beautiful, peaceful, but all Sarah could think about was the high walls topped with security cameras, the guards she'd glimpsed patrolling the perimeter. Paradise or prison? Maybe there wasn't a difference. The call came at 2 a.m., jarring Sarah from restless sleep. She'd been staying at Dante's mansion for a week now, and the luxuries still felt foreign, like wearing someone else's expensive clothes. Her phone buzzed against the marble nightstand, Mark's name glowing on the screen like a curse. She almost didn't answer. Almost. But something in the way it kept ringing, insistent and desperate, made her finger hover over the accept button. Sarah, Mark's voice was different. Raw. Broken. Please don't hang up. How did you get this number? I need to see you. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain. Sarah sat up in bed, pulling the silk sheets around her like armor. You broke into my apartment. You threatened me. I was scared. This guy you're with, Sarah, you have no idea what he's capable of. The things I've found out. Stop. He kills people, Sarah. For money. For power. For fun, maybe. Is that really what you want? To be some mobster's whore? The word hit like a slap, but Sarah forced her voice to stay steady. We're done, Mark. Stay away from me. I can't, his voice cracked. I love you. I know I messed up, I know I hurt you, but I can change. I can be better. Just give me 5 minutes to explain everything. No. Please, now he was crying, actual tears she could hear through the phone. 5 minutes. Somewhere public, somewhere safe. The park by your old apartment, you remember our first date there? Just 5 minutes, and if you still want nothing to do with me after that, I'll leave you alone forever. I swear on my mother's grave. Sarah's resolve wavered. She did remember that first date, how charming Mark had been, how he'd seemed like everything she'd ever wanted. Before the jealousy, before the control, before the violence. Sarah, please. I'm begging you. She looked around the opulent room, thought about the conversations she'd overheard, the way Marco looked at her like she was a threat to be eliminated. 5 minutes. Thank you. God. Thank you. Tomorrow at noon by the fountain.
Just you, Sarah.
If you bring your boyfriend or his thugs, I'll know you never really loved me. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. She didn't tell Dante about the call. At breakfast, she pushed eggs around her plate and made small talk about the weather while he read business reports that probably contained more violence than her favorite crime novels. Marco joined them, as he had every morning this week, his suspicious eyes cataloging her every move. You seem distracted, Marco observed, cutting into his toast with surgical precision. Something troubling you? Just adjusting, Sarah said. It's a lot to take in. I'm sure Marco's smile was thin. Going from a diner to this must feel like a fairy tale. Marco. Dante's voice held a warning.
What?
I'm just making conversation, but Marco's eyes never left Sarah's face. Though I suppose even fairy tales have their dark sides. Bluebeard's wives thought they were lucky too, until they opened the wrong door. The reference sent ice through Sarah's veins. Was he threatening her? Warning her? Both. I have some errands to run today, Sarah said carefully. Nothing important, just girl stuff. Dante looked up from his papers. Tony can drive you wherever you need to go. Tony, one of his bodyguards. Another leash, another way to track her movements. That's okay. I can take the bus. I insist. Dante's tone brooked no argument. It's not safe for you to be alone right now. Sarah forced a smile. Of course. Thank you. But when noon approached, she gave Tony the slip in the cosmetics section of a downtown department store, ducking out through the employee entrance while he waited by the escalators. She'd learned a few things about evasion during her months of avoiding Mark. The park was exactly as she remembered. Tree-lined paths, couples walking hand in hand, the old fountain where Mark had first kissed her. He was waiting on their old bench, looking smaller somehow, diminished. When he saw her coming, His face lit up with desperate hope. "You came," he breathed, standing as she approached. "I wasn't sure you would." "5 minutes," Sarah said, staying well out of arm's reach. "Start talking?" "This Moretti guy, he's not what he seems. I hired the best private investigator money could buy, and the things he found, Sarah, this man has killed at least a dozen people. He runs drugs, prostitution, illegal gambling. He's a monster." "And you're not." Mark flinched. "I never killed anyone. I never sold poison to kids or forced women into." "You put me in the hospital. I was sick." The words came out in a rush. "I know that now. I've been seeing a therapist, taking medication. I can show you the prescriptions. Sarah, I'm getting better. I'm becoming the man you deserved all along." Despite everything, Sarah felt a flicker of the old sympathy. Mark had been her first love, before everything went wrong. Maybe he really was trying to change. "I want to believe you," she said quietly. "But I can't. Too much has happened." "Then just let me help you get away from him. I have a plan." "No," Sarah stepped back, reality crashing over her. This wasn't about redemption or second chances. This was about possession, about Mark's inability to accept that she'd moved on. "This is exactly what you always do. You hurt me, then you try to save me from the consequences of your own actions." "Sarah, I'm leaving now." She turned to go, but Mark's voice stopped her cold. "I know about the meeting." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What meeting?" "Tomorrow night. Your boyfriend and his people are planning to eliminate some rivals. The Rosselli family, I think. Something about a warehouse by the docks." Mark's smile was triumphant. "My investigator has been very thorough. He's got photos, recordings, everything. One phone call to the FBI, and your precious Dante goes away forever." The trap snapped shut around her. This wasn't about reconciliation, it had never been about that. Mark had found leverage, something to force her back into his orbit. "What do you want?" she asked numbly. "Come home with me. Tonight. We disappear, start fresh somewhere else. You do that, and I forget everything I know about Moretti's business." Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Beautiful day for a reunion. Smile for the camera." Her head snapped up, scanning the park. There, by the tree line, a man with a telephoto lens. Mark's investigator, documenting everything. "Insurance," Mark said, following her gaze. "In case you try to run back to your mobster boyfriend. He'll receive copies of these photos within the hour, showing you meeting with me voluntarily. What do you think a man like that does to women who betray him?" Sarah's world tilted sideways. She thought of Marco's suspicious glances, his talk of elimination and liability, of Dante's promise that she was under his protection, and what might happen if he thought that protection had been misplaced. She was trapped between two predators, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she realized she might not survive either of them. "Tick-tock, Sarah," Mark said softly. "What's it going to be?" Sarah stared at Mark across the abandoned warehouse, her wrists burning from the zip ties that bound them behind the chair. The photos had been delivered exactly as promised. Her meeting with Mark, their embrace, the kiss he'd forced on her before his associates had drugged her and brought her here. She could only imagine what Dante thought when he saw them. "He's not coming," Mark said, pacing in front of her like a caged animal. The charming mask had slipped completely now, revealing something feral and desperate underneath. "Your boyfriend got the message loud and clear. His little whore betrayed him for her ex-men like him don't forgive that kind of humiliation." The warehouse reeked of rust and rotting wood, lit only by harsh fluorescent strips that buzzed overhead like dying insects. Mark's associates turned out to be three men she didn't recognize, muscle from whatever rival family he'd made his deal with. The Rossellis, she remembered from the overheard conversations. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Sarah said, testing the bonds around her wrists. The plastic bit into her skin, drawing blood. "You said you just wanted to talk." "I lied." Mark crouched in front of her, his face inches from hers. "You made me lie. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? The humiliation? I had to grovel to these animals, promised them information about Moretti's operations, just for the chance to get you back. I'll never be back. No matter what you do to me. Mark's hand cracked across her face, snapping her head to the side. You still don't get it, do you? There is no you without me. There never was. I made you, Sarah. I gave you worth, purpose, meaning. And this is how you repay me. One of the Rosselli men, a heavy-set guy with prison tattoos crawling up his neck, checked his watch. He's late. Maybe he really ain't coming. He'll come, another one said. Guys like Moretti, they don't let insults slide. He'll want to handle this personal. As if summoned by his words, the warehouse lights went out. The darkness was absolute, swallowing sound and space. Sarah heard Mark curse, heard the scratch of shoes on concrete, the metallic click of weapons being drawn. Positions, someone hissed. Remember, we want Moretti alive if possible. The girl's expendable. A gunshot exploded from somewhere in the rafters, impossibly loud in the enclosed space. One of the Rosselli men screamed, the sound cutting off abruptly. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red that created more shadows than it dispelled. Jesus Christ, where is he? Mark's voice cracked with panic. Another gunshot, closer this time. Sarah saw muzzle flash from behind a stack of shipping containers, saw another man spin and fall. The remaining Rosselli soldier emptied his clip in that direction, the rapid-fire reports echoing like thunder. Then silence. Mark grabbed Sarah's chair, dragging it backward toward what looked like an office area. Come out, Moretti, he screamed into the darkness. I've got your little whore. One wrong move, and I'll... The office window exploded inward in a shower of glass and gunpowder. Dante came through like an avenging angel, his face a mask of controlled fury that made Sarah's breath catch. He moved with lethal grace, a gun in each hand, and for a moment she understood exactly why people feared him. The last Rosselli man tried to bring his weapon around, but Dante was already moving. 2 shots center mass, and the man crumpled without a sound. Hello, Mark, Dante said conversationally, as if they'd run into each other at a coffee shop. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Mark pressed his gun against Sarah's temple, his hand shaking so badly the barrel rattled against her skull. Stay back. I'll kill her. I swear to God I'll. No, you won't. Dante stepped into the red light, and Sarah saw something in his face that made her soul shiver. You know how I know? Because killing her would rob you of your only leverage. And then I'd have absolutely no reason to let you live. The photos were obviously staged. Sarah would never betray me willingly. Dante's eyes found hers across the warehouse, and she saw absolute certainty there. Trust despite everything. The question is, did you force her or did you drug her? Does it matter? It matters to how long you suffer before you die. Mark's breathing was coming in short, panicked gasps. I loved her first. She was mine before she ever knew you existed. You can't just... Actually, I can. Dante raised his gun with casual precision. Sarah, close your eyes. She did, squeezing them tight, and heard the gunshot that ended Mark Davidson forever. When the ringing in her ears faded, gentle hands were cutting the zip ties from her wrists. Dante knelt beside her chair, his touch surprisingly tender for a man who'd just killed 3 people without breaking a sweat. Are you hurt? He asked, examining her face where Mark had slapped her. I'm okay, Sarah's voice came out as a croak. Dante, I didn't. The photos weren't. I know. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when her legs threatened to buckle. Marco analyzed them within an hour. The lighting was wrong, the angles too convenient. Amateur work. Then why did you take so long to come? Dante's smile was sharp as broken glass. I wanted them to think they'd won. Wanted them relaxed, overconfident. Makes the killing easier. Sarah looked around the warehouse at the bodies, at the blood pooling on the concrete floor. This was Dante's world, violence and death delivered with surgical precision. She should be horrified, should be running for the nearest exit. Instead, she felt something unlock in her chest. Relief. Safety. For the first time in her life, someone had come for her. Someone had chosen her over everything else. "Let's go home," Dante said, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. Home. Yes, Sarah thought as they walked past Mark's lifeless body. That sounded exactly right. The Moretti estate felt different when they returned in the pre-dawn hours. Safer, somehow, as if the violence at the warehouse had burned away the last of Sarah's illusions and left only truth in its wake. Dante's men efficiently disposed of their blood-stained clothes and weapons while Maria fussed over Sarah's injuries with the practiced calm of someone who'd tended to trauma before. "You should rest," Dante said as they stood in the marble foyer, but Sarah shook her head. "I can't sleep." "Not yet," she looked up at him, this man who'd killed for her without hesitation, who'd trusted her innocence when the evidence suggested betrayal. "We need to talk." They ended up in his study, surrounded by leather-bound books and oil paintings that probably had darker histories than she wanted to know. Dante poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and offered her the same, but Sarah declined. She needed her mind clear for this conversation. "Marco's going to want me gone," she said without preamble. "After tonight. After the risk I brought to your operation. Marco works for me, not the other way around." Dante's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "And you didn't bring risk. You brought clarity. Now we know who our enemies are, and they're all dead. All of them. The Rossellis will think twice before moving against us again." As for Mark, Dante's smile held no warmth. "Let's just say his private investigator won't be taking any more pictures." Sarah shivered, though not entirely from fear. There was something intoxicating about being protected with such absolute ruthlessness, about being worth killing for. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you choose." Dante set down his glass and moved closer, not quite touching but near enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You've seen what my world looks like, Sarah. Really seen it. The violence, the blood, the things we do to protect what's ours. You can walk away. I'll give you money, a new identity if you need it, protection until you're settled somewhere safe. Or you stay with me." Knowing exactly what that means. Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed. Lila's contact photo smiled up at her from the screen, all blonde hair and innocent eyes. Sarah stared at it for a long moment before declining the call. The phone immediately rang again. "Answer it," Dante said quietly. "Put it on speaker." Sarah's finger hesitated over the screen, then accepted the call. "Sarah? Thank God." Lila's voice was breathless with panic. "I've been calling for hours. Are you okay? I heard there was some kind of incident." "How did you hear about that?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from the look on Dante's face. A pause. "Too long. It's on the news. Violence at some warehouse downtown. I was worried." "No, it's not," Dante said, speaking for the first time. "Nothing's been reported yet."
My people made sure of that.
Another pause, longer this time. When Lila spoke again, her voice had changed, dropped the breathless concern for something colder. "Hello, Dante. I was wondering when you'd figured out." Sarah's world tilted sideways. "Lila, what?" "I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am. You're my best friend, and I never wanted it to go this far." Lila's voice was flat now, professional. "But the Rossellis pay better than waitressing ever did." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Sarah sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. "How long?" "Since the beginning. Mark wasn't just some obsessive ex, though he really was obsessed with you, which made it easier. We needed someone close to you, someone who could push you into Moretti's orbit and then report back on his activities." "The club," Sarah whispered. "You suggested going to that club. The Rossellis knew Dante would be there that night. We just needed you to make contact, get his attention. Though we didn't expect you to actually move in with him." Dante's expression was carved from stone, but Sarah could see the cold fury building behind his eyes. "Where are you now, Lila?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere your men will never find me." A bitter laugh. "Did you really think you could wipe out an entire crime family in one night? The Rossellis have been planning this for months. Taking you down was just the first step." And Sarah was bait. Sarah was perfect bait. Sweet, innocent, damaged enough to need saving. Exactly the type of woman to make a man like you drop your guard. Another pause. I really am sorry, Sarah. For what it's worth, I do care about you. But this is business. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, feeling like the ground had opened up beneath her feet. Everything, her friendship with Lila, her job at the diner, even her relationship with Mark, had been orchestrated. She'd been a puppet dancing to someone else's strings. She's wrong about one thing, Dante said softly. Sarah looked up at him through tears she hadn't realized she was crying. What? You're not bait anymore. You're family. And I protect my family. The word hit her like a lightning bolt. Family. Not possession, not trophy, but family. Choice, not captivity. The Rossellis will come for you, she said. For both of us. Let them try. Dante knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. I won't lie to you, Sarah. Choosing this life means choosing danger. It means blood on your hands and enemies at your door. It means never being completely safe. But it also means never being helpless again. Never being alone. Never having to run. His thumbs traced over her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it belied everything else about him. It means being mine and me being yours, until death do us part. Sarah looked into his dark eyes and saw her future reflected there, dangerous, violent, beautiful in its own twisted way. She thought about Lila's betrayal, Mark's obsession, all the ways the world had tried to break her. Then she thought about Dante coming for her through fire and blood, about the absolute certainty in his voice when he'd said she'd never betray him willingly. You'll never have to run again, he promised, echoing the words from her outline. Sarah leaned forward and kissed him, tasting whiskey and violence and something that might have been love. When they broke apart, she was smiling. Then I choose you, she said. I choose this. All of it. Dante's answering smile was sharp as a blade and twice as beautiful. Welcome to the family, sweetheart. Outside, the sun was rising over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah watched it through the tall windows and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She'd traded her past for a future filled with dark, dangerous love. And she'd never been happier.